Next up on the matchup list is the Guardian. And one thing I want to clarify before I get into this is that I'm going to be going over the identity of a class, because whether it's meta or not, you're going to need to know how to play around things, because they can still beat you. And the purpose of the guide is to show you how to play around Guardian at all times, not just in the current times. So learning some skills that may or may not be buffed later on could be useful. And of course, you do want to know how to kill a Guardian, because the identity of the Guardian is like this selfless melee class, and they give a lot of support to their teams and a lot of presence in larger fights. But they can be singled out by themselves, and a lot of their abilities that scale up in larger fights become less so powerful when they are isolated. So that is one of the main things you want to think about when playing a Guardian. Let's start out with the heal skills of Guardian. On Dragon Hunter, you have the Purification Trap, which when placed down will create a trap area. You will see this animation, but you cannot see the trap on the ground. Only allies can see that. So what you need to do is recognize that animation and remember where the trap is and not walk over it, because when you walk over it, you trigger the trap and you give them basically their heal skill. So what you need to do is delay standing on that trap for as long as you can, because the cooldown is 24 seconds. So if you don't stand on that trap for 24 seconds, they can't use their heal skill again, or they won't get the value from the first trap. If you make them use their second trap before the first trap has been used, they won't get that first one. Or you'll make them delay their second one. So you have to make them choose between really hard choices if you learn to play around Purification. Then they have Shelter. This is a 2-second block, and it will heal them after the block ends. So you don't want to be blowing a lot of your damage into their Shelter, but it is a block and can be interrupted. So if you have an unblockable CC, you can actually interrupt this heal, but it is a pretty safe heal because it is a block. Then you have Litany of Wrath. This is a very aggressive heal and probably gives the most healing out of any of the heal skills, because it gives you some meditation synergy. So usually when a Guardian is using this heal skill, they will use it with the Valor trait line and the Monk's Focus. And when they use it, it will basically give them 2 meditations, because there's a trait that makes meditations heal, and then there's a trait that makes your heal skill do another meditation. So it will give a lot of healing just by using it, but then 33% of your damage dealt will be returned to you as healing. So if you're trying to prevent a Guardian from healing a lot, you'll want to not engage them when they have Litany of Wrath up, because they'll usually win the trade, because if you do damage to them and they do damage to you, well, they'll heal off of the damage they dealt. So when you see this buff, you do not want to be trading with them. You want to either be CCing them, or you want to be avoiding them and kiting them until it's over. The Guardian class mechanic is Virtues. You have the F1, which is usually a damaging spell. Then you have the F2, which is usually a healing skill. This will give them Condi Cleanse and heal their allies. And when you swap to a Dragon Hunter, it will make the effect a little bit smaller, but it will give them a leap. And this can be interrupted mid-air. So if you ever really want to prevent a Dragon Hunter from getting away or getting a lot of their healing effect, because this heals for quite a lot, you can interrupt them mid-air. Then you have the Shield of Courage as a Dragon Hunter. This is a frontal cone block. It will block for allies, but it will not block behind you. So you can get behind the Dragon Hunter and hit them, and the block will not have an effect. As a firebrand, you have the Mantra Heal, which will give you a Aegis proc every 8 seconds, and that can add up over time. So you don't want to be wasting skills that they can instantly put an Aegis on because it has no animation. You want to kind of wait until you see that Aegis come out. But there's also many other ways that a Firebrand can gain Aegis. From the Tome of Courage, it will also give a Aegis stability and protection boon to all of their allies on a 15-second cooldown. But when they're in the tome, they will have 5 pages, so usually they'll only use this twice. They'll also have a resistance field, so if you see this, you don't want to be putting conditions on them because they'll just resist them for like 3 seconds. Then they have the projectile reflects bubble. You don't want to be using projectiles into this because they'll get reflected back at you. They have a small taunt near them, which isn't a big deal. But yeah, you basically want to be playing around these 3 skills in the Tome 3. And then the Healing Tome will give them Condition Cleanse. So if you see that they're in the Healing Tome, then basically a lot of your conditions are going to be cleansed off and converted into boons. So with their 5 skill, that will convert 2 conditions into boons on all nearby allies. Then they have some healing here with this big AoE that they can create a water field with. And then they have vigor and regen, so it's mostly just healing, and then a little bit of Condi Cleanse on the 2 skills. So Condi Cleanse and healing. But the differences between these two is that the Protection Tome is a lot safer than the Healing Tome, because the Protection Tome can't be interrupted, whereas because of the amount of Aegis and stability it gives. Whereas the Healing Tome doesn't have any of that, it just kind of gives healing. So if you are going to try to interrupt a Firebrand, you want to be doing that while they're in the Heal Tome, not in the Prot Tome. While they're in the Prot Tome, you just want to rip boons, or just kind of wait to save your damage for after they leave the Prot Tome. And then Core Guardians, they just have very basic virtues. This will just heal, and the Virtue of Courage will just give an Aegis. And with the Virtues trait line, those can give stability or extra cleansing depending on whether you take the Virtues trait line. So the F2 is like cleansing and healing, the F3 is like protection, Aegis, and stuff like that. And you can see which of these they have off cooldown by looking at their buff bar. So if they have Virtue of Resolve off cooldown, as you can see here, then you know that they have Condi Cleanse. And if they have Virtue of Courage up here, then you know they might have a stun break, because they can get a stun break from the F3 trait in Virtues. So playing around what you know their cooldowns are can be done based on looking at their buffs. However, Firebrand is a little bit different because most of them take Lore Master, and even if they have a tome on cooldown, then it will still show the passive effect because they are still getting the passive effect while it's on cooldown. So you don't really know which tomes the Firebrand will have off cooldown, so you just kind of have to go off of memory. And the tome cooldowns are very long, so if you have seen them use it recently, then you know that it's very likely it's on cooldowns. Many Guardian animations and utility skills have no cast times because they are either meditations or shouts. So Guardians are very, very strong against CC, and they can just stun break with their many stun breaks, or they can sometimes even use skills that give them blocks even while they are stunned. So they have a lot of magical powers to transcend their physical abilities. You have Stand Your Ground, which is a shout which will give stability and retaliation to nearby allies, and it will stun break them. This prevents a lot of the CC that will be dealt to them. It is a little bit of a decent cooldown, but it's still very strong. So if you know that they're running the skill because you see the stability stacks, no other skill on Guardian gives this many stability stacks, you'll see that they are running this, and you want to wait until it's been used to go for CCs. Then you have Contemplation of Purity. This is a very selfish but very strong stun break, and it will give you a instant cast stun break that will convert all the conditions you are suffering into boons. So if you see that a Guardian just gains a ton of boons from having a ton of conditions, you know that they're running this. And you shouldn't go for heavy Condi bursts on a Guardian that has this. You should try to do gradual conditions over time, because the more that they convert, the more that they will gain out of it. And you want to make them choose between situations where it's like, well, do I want to cleanse like a couple Condis here and there that are constantly being applied, or do I save it for a moment where I get a huge burst on me? So Contemplation of Purity and just Guardian in general deals very well with being focused, because it has these very high effect skills. You also will have Save Yourselves, which gives them a ton of boons, so it could either be Contemplation of Purity they use, or it could be Save Yourselves. And this is a little bit different, because even though it is a stun break, it will not cleanse conditions. It will give them resistance, but it will also draw conditions from nearby allies to them, which means that they'll be supporting their allies. And that's one thing that's really important about Guardians, is that they're supporting their allies while they are doing their stuff. So they are one of the key targets in fights, but they're also hard to focus. So it is kind of hard to decide whether you want to focus a Guardian because they're giving too much support to their team in a fight, or whether you want to focus them because you know that they're out of cooldowns, and maybe they use their cooldowns to support their allies, and now they're low and they can be focused themselves. So that's generally how you want to play around Guardians, because if you focus them at the start, they have a lot of cooldowns and stuff like that to support themselves. But if you focus someone else, you can sometimes bait out the Guardian's cooldowns already, because they're a very cooldown oriented class, and then after a while you can swap to the Guardian if you're not seeing results because that Guardian is supporting their team too much. Guardians will also have lots of reflects and bubbles that will destroy or reflect projectiles, so you really don't want to be attacking Guardians with projectiles too often, because they'll generally be able to handle that. The weapon skills that you want to play around are the Mace 3, which will give a block effect, and if you hit the Guardian or anyone near the Guardian while they're using that animation, they will give out another Aegis and do a lot of damage and protection as well. So you want to try not to proc this if possible, but you will also have to stop attacking to do so. So you have to decide whether you want to attack and push through the damage and the sustain, or whether you want to save cooldowns. Usually in smaller scale situations you want to not hit the Protector Strike, but in larger scale situations you want to just push through it. You also have the Shield of Judgment, which will give an Aegis. You just want to play around Aegis very well against Guardians. Aegis will block the next attack, and it doesn't matter if the attack does 2 damage or 10,000 damage. If it's one attack, an Aegis can be very powerful, or it can do basically nothing. So how you want to play around Aegis is you want to use very quick but low investment attacks to get rid of the Aegis, and then you can use your actual meaningful abilities on them. They also have Shield of Absorption, which is a instant cast knockback. So if you're playing around a Guardian with the shield, you don't want to put yourself in a situation where they can like knock you down a hole or decap you using this knockback. So you want to position yourself at all times, assuming that they can instantly knock you back if they have a shield on. So putting yourself like a back to a wall, or maybe just not angling yourself in a way that they can push you where they want you to go. You also have the Focus 5 Shield of Wrath, which is a 3 block animation. It will block the next 3 attacks, so it serves as like a triple Aegis, and if it does not get broken. So if you don't break all 3 of those Aegis effects before it ends in 4 seconds, then it will explode for a lot of damage. So generally, you want to not waste skills into the Shield of Wrath, but you also want to hit it because you don't want them to get the big damage at the end. And because this is an instant cast skill, they can use it while they are stunned or while doing like a stomp. So you always want to play around the ability for them to have that if they're using a focus. The main damage that Guardians deal comes from their symbols, which are like ground targeted AoEs, and they will place a ring on the ground like that, and allies of the Guardian will gain boons, and enemies will get damage that stand in them. So if a Guardian is standing in their symbols, you want to basically bait them out of the symbol and force them to go in a different place. So you want them to come to you, not you go to them, because they have a massive advantage inside their symbols because you're taking damage and they're gaining boons and sustain. So playing around symbols when you're in PvP and the enemy has the node, you don't want to stand on the node because they already own the node and you want to kill them. So getting the kill is probably going to be easier if you don't stand on the node. Now obviously if you own the node and you want to defend it, then it's going to be a lot more difficult to do so because you're going to be forced to stand in the enemy's symbols sometimes, and they can pressure you a lot and give them quite an advantage. Also, Guardians do give a lot of burning, so whenever they attack, they will charge up their Virtue of Justice, and every 3rd time they hit, or every 5th time they hit, depending on whether they have Permeating Wrath, they will give burning to their target. So all their attacks basically give burning over time, even if they're not a condition damage build. So even like very bursty power Guardians will do a lot of burning damage. Another thing that Guardians have is retaliation. Retaliation scales with power, so generally it's better with power, and you gain retaliation if you have the virtue trait line whenever you use a virtue, and if you have stuff like save yourselves or stand your ground, or even like a lot of firebrand things will give retaliation. So hitting a Guardian is always going to give you some sort of damage, so it's a very sustainable class over time if they just survive, and you'll be taxing yourself of health to hit them. So you want to go with heavy hitting single abilities, but then also that gets countered by Aegis. So you want to play around Retal by not hitting them needlessly with small attacks that are going to do nothing, but you also want to be careful not to use your big attacks into their Aegis. Burning Guardians will usually use the Permeating Wrath trait, which will make the passive effect of their Virtue of Justice skill do an AoE and proc almost twice as fast. So when a Burn Guardian is in large fights, it will exponentially scale up their damage, because if they hit one target, then their Virtue of Justice is going at a rate of 1, but if they hit 2 targets, then it's double that. If they hit 3 targets, then it's going triple. And every time they proc their Virtue with Permeating Wrath, it's doing an AoE. So you're hitting every single target, and you're making the AoE happen faster. So it scales up exponentially in those larger scale situations, and because of that, the Burn Guardian is very strong in team fights. And how to play around that is, when you know that the enemy has a Burn Guardian, you want to split up. You don't want to let them cleave you and hit as many targets as possible. So don't stand on top of them. If you're all on top of the Guardian, then he's just hitting you all. You want to split up and focus them one at a time, and if they get one of you down, do not res if they have a lot of damage left, because their specialty is cleaving out downstate bodies and preventing people from resing. There's also the Purging Flames utility, which creates a ring of fire around the location, and It gives them Condi Cleanse to stand in it, but it has no effect to enemies that stand in it. However, enemies will get burning on the initial cast of it, and each time that they walk through the outer ring. So if you're inside of it, you're fine, but if you walk in from being outside or walk out from being inside, you will get a lot of burn on you. So what you want to do is either decide which side you want to be on and then dodge to that side of it, because you'll evade the burn application to dodge in or out of the circle, and then try to stay there. If they're using the Sword of Justice, you'll want to avoid that no matter what build they're running, because it'll deal tons of power damage or tons of condition damage, and in conjunction with the Permeating Wrath, it will proc tons of times and create a massive burn. That was not even proccing the Permeating Wrath there, but it still got 5 burn stacks. So yeah, and imagine if that hit 2 people at the same time. That would be like 8 or 9 burns per target. So that would be, yeah, it's a lot of damage. So you want to avoid the Sword of Justice no matter what. The next archetype you want to watch out for is a Dragon Hunter, or a power version of that. You do have the Burn Dragon Hunters, but that's pretty much every Burn Guardian has the same idea. So a Power Dragon Hunter is usually going to be running the Longbow. The most important skills to avoid are the True Shot, which they will kneel like this and then do a very long range piercing ability that hits really hard. You can reflect it, or you can block it, or you can just dodge it if you see it's coming, and that's going to be most of their damage right there. But they also have the Spear of Justice, so when you see them kneel, that's the True Shot, and if you see them like move their arm like this, that is the Spear of Justice, and then you'll see the spear coming at you too. But if you get hit by the spear, it's going to cripple you and allow them to pull you. And that can be really dangerous, because it will sacrifice your positioning if they pull you. And it will also allow them to combo you with a lot of their burst abilities. So another thing you really need to watch out for against Dragon Hunters, this is like the third thing you gotta watch out for, is like Test of Fate. And Test of Fate is a trap. So if they place it down in the middle of nowhere, you'll see it there because you'll see this animation. But if they put it on top of you, it'll instantly proc and create this ring around you. Now it is just like Purging Flames, so if you are inside of it, you're fine. But if you try to pass through it, you will take tons of power damage. And what the Dragon Hunter can do is they can actually force you to walk through it by basically pulling you and pushing you through it. So if you get speared, they can pull you through it. So what you want to do against the spear is you want to go to the same side of the trap that they are on. So if they're inside the trap, then you want to be, and they can always dodge out and pull like this and then do the push back in. So you want to be careful and just basically stay on top of the Dragon Hunter if they have the spear activate ready, because if they pull you and you're right next to them, well then you don't get pulled through the trap. So yeah, you want to play very aggressively when you have the Spear of Justice on you, because the further away you are, the more distance you get pulled and the more time that you are CC'd. And also, if you do get Spear of Justice pulled, you know that the effect to pull is on cooldown every other F1 cast. So if I know I got pulled just now and then they use a spear and land it on me again, that next spear, which is right after the one that they pulled you, it will be on cooldown, because the cooldown of the actual pull is like doubled of the actual casting of the spear. So every other spear you can get pulled, and obviously if they miss, then that's even better. And finally, you're going to have a more bruiser-oriented melee meditation type Guardian. Usually they play it as core, but they have the sword and focus, and the great sword usually. They can run hammer and scepter, but you want to look out for the Whirling Wrath from the Greatsword. And this has a very obvious animation, and it'll do tons of damage. So you want to always dodge that. They do have ways to kind of land it with their binding blade and to like pull people into it. So you got to be careful of that too. And in the sword focus, they'll usually have some more mobility and stuff like that. They do have the Shield of Wrath, which is something you got to watch out for because they'll usually have ports, so they can precast Shield of Wrath. If you see a Guardian has Shield of Wrath activated from far, it means that they're going to pour it in when it's about to explode. So you do have to kind of like dodge when you see it's about to pop. Then they have Ray of Judgment. Ray of Judgment is one of the harder skills to counterplay because you never really know when it's coming until you see it's there. And that's because it's such a long range ability. So most of their attacks are melee, but then they have Ray of Judgment, which they'll lift their arms and then you'll see sort of like this like convergence of light on whoever they cast it on. And if you dodge as soon as that convergence starts to happen, then you can avoid it. But if you don't, then you'll get pulsing damage on you from range, which can add up over time for quite a bit and tax you of a lot of your cooldowns. They'll also get a very strong Immobilize when they have the Scepter, and that can allow them to make you stand in their symbols or make you stand there for really powerful hammer attacks or the Greatsword attack. And any of those very powerful melee attacks can also be combined with Judge's Intervention, which will create a very long-ranged burst attack out of a usually melee attack. So you do have to be careful at all times if you're low HP. As far as specific matchups go, Thieves are countered by Guardians not only because they're so hard to focus, but also they make their teammates harder to kill, leaving the Thief with less options of targets to focus. Thieves will just die to retaliation if they don't end the fight fast. Warriors struggle to handle Guardians because of the amount of blinds and Aegis that Guardians dish out, and Warriors have very telegraphed and linear attacks, making it easy to counter their damage. Rangers excel in splitting up the enemy team, making situations where Guardians can be isolated and easy to kill. But if the enemy sticks together, a Guardian will make a Ranger useless in a teamfight. Necromancers are the masters of corrupting boons, and Guardians are the masters of boons, so any kind of build that will remove boons is going to be strong against Guardians. So Necromancers are probably the main thing to kill Guardians, but also Guardians are the main thing to counter Necromancers with their ability to bully them out of fights and support their team from the Necromancer's heavy damaging AoEs. So it very much goes both ways here. Mesmers counter Guardians because they're so slippery and Guardians can't keep up. Also, the clones will remove Aegis for free, allowing the Mesmer to ration their abilities freely. Revenants and Elementalists also counter Guardians because of their many attacks they can afford to break Aegis, and they love being in long, sustained fights that the Guardians will create. So here's a situation where I am playing a Burn Guardian and I see another Burn Guardian is headed towards me while I own the node. I don't want to fight on the node because then I have to fight in the enemy's symbols. So what I do is I try to control the area outside the node. Guardians will try to control areas by putting down their AoEs and then fighting in them. So you don't want to fight near their AoEs. But now I'm also in a 1v2, and one thing that Guardians really are not good at is disengaging. They're very good at engaging fights, but they are probably one of the slowest classes. So if they ever are in a situation where they're isolated and outnumbered, they struggle. But they can throw down AoEs while kiting to peel for themselves, because counter pressure is the only way that they really can escape. And I actually do get a down, and this is why Burn Guardian is so dangerous, because when you do outnumber them like this, you get hit by all those burns because you're not playing safe, you're playing aggressively. So if you like this video, give it a like and subscribe for more, and check out the matchup playlist to learn about the other classes, and I'll see you guys next time.